We're going to talk a little bit about nutrition here today. And I really value nutrition as a healthcare professional because I feel like we can really help our patients, help with guiding them, especially if they eat an inflammatory diet. You notice they have a lot of visceral fat. We can incorporate this into our um, everyday treatments and really help patients. If I have a patient that is being I'm seeing and they have chronic back pain and have all this visceral adipose tissue around their waist and some metabolic syndrome symptoms, then eliminating the inflammation and through diet, low carbohydrates, low glycemic food, stuff we'll talk about in this video, can have a profound impact on them. And then just for yourself, just some tips that might help you maintain a healthy body weight and a good metabolism. I want to talk about a hormone here that is in the corner of intermittent fasting. So I remember there for a while it was a fad where they said eat every 2 hours, you got to keep your metabolism up and thermogenesis. But that's a myth. If you eat 1 pound of food over the course of 10 meals, or 1 pound of food in one meal, you're going to get the same metabolism from a thermogenesis aspect in both situations. But what's good about spreading your meals out, doing an intermittent fast, maybe 16, 18 hours, building off your sleep. You have 8 or 9 hours there. Just skip your breakfast, kind of eat a late lunch, and you get this long break, which is great for hormone sensitive lipase. This is the main enzyme that causes our adipocytes, the cells that make up our adipose tissue, to take our triglycerides that are stored as fat and break them down so that they can be used for energy. And hormone sensitive lipase is sensitive to three hormones primarily, two that kick it in gear and one that inhibits it. So the two that kick it in gear are epinephrine and norepinephrine. They kind of go together. That's one. And then the other one is glucagon. And you remember, glucagon is kind of the opposite of insulin. Both are made by the pancreas, but when our blood sugar is high, insulin will bring it down. When our blood sugar starts to go low, glucagon gets kicked in and will go to our liver and cause glycogenolysis, where we can get some glucose from the liver. And it can go to adipocytes, or fat cells, and cause lipolysis, which is the breakdown of fat. And so these two hormones, epinephrine and glucagon, stimulate through this second messenger system over here. You can see the G protein and the cyclic AMP, that's the second messenger, and you have the protein kinase A, but ultimately it's going to cause the triglycerides to break down into the glycerol and the three fatty acids, and eventually those will get chopped off in twos and enter the Krebs cycle in the mitochondria. That's that organelle shown there at the bottom, and it'll crank out ATP and be used for energy. And insulin, on the other hand, inhibits hormone sensitive lipase. So if you're eating every 2 hours, you're never going to clear insulin from your bloodstream. You're never going to get hormone sensitive lipase going. So if you get a good long 14 to 18 hour intermittent fast, you're going to get that glucagon and epinephrine out there and get hormone sensitive lipase going. I want to talk about a hormone. Adipocytes are more than just reservoirs for fat. These fat cells also act like an endocrine gland and secrete leptin, which goes into the blood, binds to receptors on the hypothalamus of the brain, deep in the brain, and that makes us feel satiated. And it also has effects on our metabolism. It has a positive effect on the thyroid gland, which ultimately plays a huge role in our metabolism. And so we want this system we want leptin sensitivity. We want the hypothalamus to respond well to leptin. But when we start getting off our diet and eating high glycemic foods, refined foods, getting away from whole foods, and starting to get too many calories and going towards visceral fat, then we start to get resistant to leptin. And basically the same things that cause insulin resistance can also cause leptin resistance. And what happens is our hypothalamus stops responding to it. It doesn't matter how much leptin is cranked out. And in fact, leptin levels go up because the more fat cells we have, we get more. But it doesn't matter how much leptin's out there if the hypothalamus can't respond to it. So it's good to get that leptin under control and get it sensitive again. And if you are leptin resistant or insulin resistant, if you maybe try intermittent fast, even longer fast, exercise, eat a healthy diet, you can reverse it. So metabolic syndrome is kind of what happens when you get insulin resistant and leptin resistant, and it's just a downward spiral, like a domino effect. You can see this guy has a huge visceral component, visceral fat there around the waist. In fact, that's one of the symptoms or criteria for metabolic syndrome is having a waist larger than 40 inches for a man, 35 for a woman. Fasting blood sugar, we want to keep it under 100 milligrams per deciliter. Blood pressure, we want it lower than 130 over 85. HDL, we actually want this high. We want it above 40 milligrams per deciliter for men and above 50 for women. In fact, centenarians, that's one thing that jumps out about their blood work is that they have really high HDL. And HDL is the good cholesterol. It kind of keeps our blood vessels nice and clear of plaques. Triglycerides, we want to keep this under 150 milligrams per deciliter. But if you have 3 of these, you officially have metabolic syndrome. I want to talk a little bit about Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. So Dirty Dozens, these are the ones you really want to buy organic to avoid the pesticides. Cancer is something you do not want to treat. It's much easier to prevent. And if we can avoid these pesticides, that's one less carcinogen that can cause mutations that lead to cancer. So the Dirty Dozen, a lot of these, they don't have a real thick cover, or you maybe eat the outside. And so if those pesticides are sprayed on it, you're going to end up consuming that, like spinach or grapes or blueberries or apples. Even potatoes, a lot of times we'll eat the skin of potatoes, and the way they require a lot of pesticides, so it just kind of seeps down into the ground and they kind of soak them up. The Clean 15, it's ones that a lot of these have thick coverings around them, like the avocado. We think, avocados are expensive enough, so if we can buy those conventionally, that's good. And pineapples, they have that covering around them. Now, sweet potatoes, you think maybe they're kind of like potatoes, but they just don't require pesticides inherently. They don't really get a lot of bugs on them and stuff, so they're typically fine. So I want to get into the healthiest foods. These I found with all the different diets out there that you really can't go wrong with these, especially if you can go wrong. Like, for example, spinach, you'd want to buy organic because they could have pesticides. But if you buy them correctly, these are what you really want to get in your system. And you've probably heard of the Mediterranean diet. It's a heart-healthy diet. And what really jumps out about that diet is they'll consume, on average, a liter of olive oil per person per week. And that's hard to do. I try to get as much of this as I can in my system, and it takes several weeks, if not a month, to get through a full liter. When you get olive oil, make sure it's cold pressed, and because that'll keep it from getting oxidized. So you want extra virgin cold pressed olive oil. And avocados, these are great. They have some omega-3s in them. They're just a real good healthy fat, real nutritious. Blueberries, out of the fruits, blueberries and other berries, they have a low glycemic index, so they have a nice, even, smooth release into the bloodstream. Insulin gives a nice, smooth release as well. And it's a high glycemic food. It's kind of like white potatoes and bread and sugar that just jump into the bloodstream, cause a spike of insulin that overshoots. That causes that's where you go from hyperglycemia, from the just jump of the sugar jumping into the bloodstream, to hypoglycemia because the insulin overshoots, and it's just this vicious cycle that can wreak havoc and lead you towards metabolic syndrome. Spinach is great. I try to eat one big salad a day because the spinach will, you can put avocado, you can put olive oil and spinach. You can throw some salmon on there. Even vegetables, you can put seeds and nuts on there. So it's a good way to incorporate a lot of these, and I try to do that routinely. It's good. It's okay to splurge every once in a while, but if you're on a routine basis of eating healthy, then you're probably all right. Cruciferous vegetables, these are a lot of times contain sulfur. I think they're all coming from a mustard plant. They all derive from a mustard plant being bred different ways, but you have cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, all from this family. Wild-caught salmon, there's tons of omega-3s. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. Inflammation is the root of so many different problems you can have health-wise. So decreasing inflammation in your body will help your arteries from being inflamed and angry, where it catches on to plaque and leads to a heart attack and stroke. But wild-caught salmon's better for you than farm-raised. It's a little more expensive. Atlantic and Norwegian salmon, those are farm-raised, and then Alaskan salmon is always wild-caught. And nuts and seeds, these are great for you. Try to incorporate some of those. I remember a study where one cohort didn't eat a handful of nuts a day. These were elderly subjects. The other cohort did, and the one that did lived 5 years longer. So despite what all it does, it obviously helps with longevity. Sauerkraut. Now, sauerkraut's great because it's cabbage, so you get cruciferous vegetable, and then it's fermented, so you get good probiotics, good bacteria. And this is really important if you are taking antibiotics, because that can decimate your good bacteria in your intestines, and you need to get that balance back. So it's good to eat yogurt and sauerkraut and pickled whatever during the time, especially all the time, but especially when you're taking antibiotics, to keep that balance there of the good bacteria, keeping the bad ones in check, and also preventing that antibiotic diarrhea that happens when they get off balance. It also would help prevent candida, which is a yeast infection secondary to antibiotics. And then eggs. Eggs are full of choline and nutrition. They are a little high in cholesterol, but I think it's worth the trade-off. Your body makes most of your cholesterol and will kind of cut down if you eat more cholesterol. So I think in this case, it's well worth it to get the nutrients. And I like to combine avocado, sauerkraut, and eggs. And I know it may not sound good with the sauerkraut and eggs, but if you try it, it blends nicely. So that's just some tips on some nutrition, and I will catch y'all on the next video. If you have any comments, just leave them in the comment section or shoot me an email, and I'll get to them. Thank you.